The cameras were already rolling when the siren screamed. For police cars zoomed into the crowded food shelter lot, tires screeching as they stopped inches from the curb. Officers in bulletproof vests jumped out, hands on guns, barking orders. Step away from the table. Hands in the air. The crowd froze. Mothers clutched their children. Homeless men backed up slowly. But in the middle of it all stood a short, dark-skinned man in an old hoodie, holding a ladle and scooping rice onto a child's plate. He looked up, confused, and dropped the spoon. "There he is," one officer yelled. "That's the fraud. Get him." They surrounded the man. One of them yanked off his hoodie and forced him to the ground. Everyone stared in shock. "He's been lying about being a community leader," an officer said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This whole food shelter is a scam." Phones were out now. People were recording. Some were crying. One woman shouted, "That man feeds us every week." But the police didn't listen. One officer pulled open the boxes and tubs of food on the table, expecting to find stolen goods or illegal supplies. Instead, they found brand new bags of rice, beans, canned fish, and small envelopes with money sealed with handwritten notes. "God bless you. Stay strong." They opened the van parked nearby. Inside were boxes of brand new shoes, soap, toothpaste, and school bags, all labeled by age and gender. One officer muttered, "Wait, this isn't stolen. This is charity." The crowd began to whisper. Then someone called out, "Why are you arresting the only one who helps us?" The man looked up from the ground, his face dusty, tears forming in his eyes. He spoke softly, "I don't do this for credit. I do it because nobody else does." The officers froze. They had set a trap for a fraud, but found unimaginable generosity. Then the police chief's voice crackled through the radio. "We've got new intel. This might not be who we thought it was." Everything stopped. Who was this man really? Why was he being accused in the first place? And more importantly, if he wasn't a fraud, who set him up? It started 3 months earlier on a chilly morning in a town that people often ignored. The kind of town where houses looked tired, and most people were too. There weren't many jobs, and many families had to skip meals. In the middle of that town was a small abandoned church that everyone thought was empty. But it wasn't. Every morning before sunrise, a man named Elijah would unlock its rusty doors. He was quiet, always wearing the same black hoodie and worn-out sneakers. No one really knew where he came from or where he lived. Some said he slept in the church. Others said he had no home at all. But one thing was sure, Elijah cared. At first, he gave away bread and water, then warm soup, then more food. Somehow, even when he had nothing, he always had something to give. People started coming to the church every morning, single mothers, hungry kids, old men with nowhere to go. Elijah never turned anyone away. "Are you an angel?" a child once asked. He smiled. "No, just someone who remembers what hunger feels like." But not everyone liked what he was doing. One day, a man in a shiny suit named Mr. Bradford showed up. He was a town leader, rich, loud, and always talking about keeping the streets clean. He didn't like seeing crowds around the church. He didn't like people thanking Elijah instead of him. And he really didn't like not knowing where the food and money came from. "I heard you're running some kind of program," Mr. Bradford said, smiling in that fake way adults sometimes do. "But these things need approval, don't they?" "I'm not taking anything from the town," Elijah replied. "I just give what I can." "Well," Bradford said, eyes narrowing, "people talk. You'd be smart to shut this down before someone checks where you're getting all these supplies from." Elijah said nothing. He just went back inside and kept serving. Weeks passed. The line outside the church got longer. One woman found a note in her food box that said, "Your rent has been paid for the month." Another man received medicine he hadn't been able to afford. No one knew how Elijah did it. No one knew where the money came from. But that only made Bradford angrier. He was used to control, used to being praised. Elijah made him feel invisible, and he hated it. So he made a plan. He told the police Elijah was stealing, said he had fake documents, said he was pretending to be someone important. He said the man was lying to the people, tricking them. And then he called a local news station. "There's a fraud in your town," he whispered into the phone. "Catch him live." The next Saturday, with the cameras hiding in parked vans and police officers waiting nearby, they let Elijah do what he always did: feed the people. Until the sirens came. Until the trap was set. Until the truth began to fall apart. That night, as Elijah sat in the back of a police van, handcuffed and silent, someone slipped something through the window bars. It was a folded piece of paper. He opened it. On it was a message that read, "We know what you've done for us. We will speak." Then suddenly, outside, a scream rang out. "Elijah, you need to see this." The officer opened the van door. A massive crowd had gathered. Hundreds of people, holding signs, standing in silence. Children stood with drawings in their hands. One read, "Thank you for my school shoes." Another, "He gave me food when no one else would." Police officers stood frozen. The media van slowly backed away. Bradford stood nearby, sweating. He hadn't expected this. And then, from deep in the crowd, someone shouted something that would change everything. "Elijah's not just a helper, he's my brother. And you all don't know who he really is." All heads turned. Elijah looked up, eyes wide. That voice, he hadn't heard it in years. The crowd parted, and the person stepped forward. And that was when the ground shifted. The person who stepped forward was a woman, tall, dark-skinned, with a firm walk and fire in her eyes. She wore a soldier's jacket, her name badge glinting in the sun, Captain Nia Obesai. "Elijah Obesai is my brother," she said, her voice clear and loud. "And before any of you shame him, arrest him, or call him a fraud, let me tell you who he really is." Everyone was silent. Even the officers lowered their weapons slightly. Captain Nia walked up to the police chief and looked him straight in the eyes. "My brother is a trained medic. He served in 3 different war zones as a volunteer. When our parents died, he gave up his career to care for our sick grandmother. And when she passed, he came here to help others who were forgotten." The police chief blinked. "We were told." "You were told lies," Nia snapped, "by someone who's afraid of losing control. Someone who didn't like that Elijah helped people without needing permission or applause." Bradford took a step back, pretending to check his watch. People were beginning to murmur. "Elijah gave up everything," Nia continued. "He used his army savings to start this food drive. He buys the supplies himself. He even sold our family land to keep it going." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "And the money you found in those envelopes, that was his, because he believed even the poor deserved to feel dignity, not just pity." The police chief looked at Elijah. The man still sat quietly in the back of the van, eyes low, not saying a word. "Is this true?" the chief asked. Elijah only nodded. "It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is they needed help." The chief looked conflicted. "But we still have to verify." "Verify this," Nia said, and pulled a folder from her bag. "Certified documents, receipts, and reports from every supplier he's used. All clean. All paid for." Another silence. The camera crews, still rolling, were now capturing something unexpected. Not a man caught in a lie, but a man whose truth was so deep, even the system had to pause. That was when a little boy, no older than 8, broke through the police line. He ran straight to Elijah and hugged his knees. "This is the man who gave me a birthday cake when my mama couldn't," he said, tears in his eyes. "He's not a bad man." The boy's mother ran after him, sobbing. "Elijah helped us when my husband died. Please don't take him away." Then another person stepped forward, and another, and another. One by one, the crowd began to speak. Their voices, once silenced by poverty and shame, now rose together. Stories poured out. How Elijah fixed broken shoes. How he paid a hospital bill. How he helped kids with homework in the back of the church. It was overwhelming. Bradford turned pale. The news reporters shifted their cameras from the police to the people. Something was changing fast. And that's when the twist came. A young journalist, wide-eyed and nervous, stepped forward with her tablet. I have something to show you," she said to the police chief. "When we were preparing for this sting operation, I dug deeper into Elijah's background." She pressed play on a short video. It showed Elijah, younger, in a dusty field hospital, tending to wounded children during a civil war. His hands were steady, his eyes calm. The camera zoomed out. Bombs could be heard in the distance. Then a voice spoke in the background. "That man saved my life. He carried me 3 miles through sniper fire." The clip ended. Everyone was quiet again. The chief turned to his officers. "Take off his cuffs." As they stepped forward, Bradford finally snapped. "This is insane. He's just a poor man with a good story. You're letting emotions blind your duty." But no one was listening anymore. Then Nia spoke again. "You think money makes a person real? My brother gave more with his broken wallet than you ever did with your luxury suits." Bradford growled. "This isn't over." "Oh, I know," she said, staring him down, "because now you're the one being investigated." Suddenly, the police chief's phone rang. He answered, then looked at Bradford with narrowed eyes. "We just received a complaint about you. Anonymous tip. Misuse of city funds." Bradford's mouth fell open. What? The crowd erupted in whispers. Elijah slowly stood, massaging his wrists as the handcuffs came off. He walked past Bradford without a word, picked up his ladle, and scooped rice back into a child's plate. "I have food to serve," he said. And just like that, he was back to doing what he always did, giving. But as the police turned their attention to Bradford and the news vans began to swarm him instead, Elijah's eyes met Nia's. "I didn't want this attention," he whispered. "You didn't ask for it," she replied. "But maybe now they'll stop trying to punish the good." For a moment, it seemed like the dust was settling. But then, right as people began to leave, a loud bang echoed from the side of the church. Screams followed. Smoke poured out from the van Elijah had parked earlier, the one filled with school bags and food. Someone had set it on fire, and standing nearby, half hidden behind the fence, was a shadowy figure in a dark coat, holding a lighter. The crowd panicked. Elijah froze, and then he ran. Elijah sprinted toward the burning van, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. Smoke curled into the sky as the flames grew, licking at the boxes he had packed with such care. Children's notebooks, school shoes, food for the week. All of it was going up in fire. "No, no, no," he shouted, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the church's side wall. But it was small, too small, and the fire too big. Behind him, people screamed. Someone called the fire department. Another tried to throw sand. Nia joined him, jacket tied around her mouth, helping with buckets of water. But the van was already caving in, its windows bursting one by one like painful cries. "I just loaded it this morning," Elijah whispered, the smoke making his voice crack. "Those school bags were for the orphanage. They were waiting for them." "Someone did this on purpose," Nia said, her voice sharp. "That wasn't an accident." Elijah turned quickly, scanning the area. He saw him, just for a second, a tall man in a dark coat, ducking behind a tree near the church fence. Too far to grab, too fast to follow, but not fast enough to erase his image. "I saw his face," Elijah said. "He was watching, smiling." The fire truck finally arrived, sirens wailing. But it was too late. The van and everything inside was gone. A little girl stood nearby, tears on her cheeks. "That was my school bag," she whispered. Elijah couldn't speak. He dropped to his knees, the heat of the fire still burning on his skin. All he could do was press a hand to his heart and pray the pain wouldn't swallow him whole. The next morning, the town was buzzing. Someone attacked Elijah's van. Do you think it was Bradford? Is he trying to get rid of Elijah? News crews circled the ruins of the burned van like vultures. But Elijah didn't say much. He just cleaned the ashes, swept the lot, and stacked the few supplies that hadn't been in the van. "Brother," Nia said quietly, watching him scrub the pavement, "you can't pretend this didn't happen. Someone is targeting you. First the police setup, now this fire." "I'm not afraid for myself," Elijah said. "But the kids, the mothers, they're scared now. They think the help is going to stop." "Is it?" He looked up, eyes fierce despite the ash on his face. "Never." That day, Elijah reopened the food shelter. He had less to give, but he gave anyway. Just soup and bread, The line was longer than ever, and though some people looked nervous, they stayed. Because Elijah stayed. That night, after the last person left, Elijah sat on the church steps, watching the stars. His hands were blistered, his soul heavy. He wondered if this battle would ever end, if he was strong enough to fight it. Then someone walked up and handed him an envelope. No name, just a gold seal. Inside was a note. You've made enemies, Elijah. People with money and power. Walk away, or we'll destroy more than your van. There was no signature, but Elijah already knew who sent it. Bradford, he murmured. The next day, Elijah and Nia went to the mayor's office. Mayor Louise Turner was a tired woman with silver hair and a voice like iron. Do you have proof Bradford was behind the fire? She asked, folding her hands. No, Elijah said, but I saw someone, and I've received threats. Someone scared of what I'm doing. You mean helping people? The mayor raised an eyebrow. Helping them without asking anyone's permission, Nia added. The mayor leaned back. You've become a symbol, Elijah, and symbols threaten those who build their power on silence. But I'm not trying to be a symbol, Elijah said. That's the thing about symbols, she said. You don't choose to be one. People choose for you. She slid a paper across the desk. This is an offer, she said. We'll officially register your shelter, give you protection, and fund your supplies. But it means you'll work with the city. Follow our rules. Accept limits. Elijah stared at the paper. And if I say no, then Bradford will come for you again. And next time, it might not just be a van. Elijah stood. I need to think about it. As he turned to leave, the mayor stopped him. Be careful, Elijah. You've awakened something in this town. Not just hope, but fear in those who never wanted the poor to have a voice. That night, Elijah walked back to the church, hands in his pockets. The stars were hidden by clouds. Even the moon looked uncertain. When he reached the door, he paused. It was unlocked, but he always locked it. Slowly, he stepped inside. The candles were still burning from earlier. The floor was clean. Everything looked normal, until he reached the front pew. Sitting there, arms crossed, was Mr. Bradford. You left your door open, he said, voice smooth like oil. Very careless for a man with enemies. Elijah didn't answer. You've become a problem, Bradford said. The people see you as some kind of hero. But you and I both know they don't stay loyal. Not when the food runs out. Not when the hope dries up. I'm not doing this for loyalty, Elijah said. I'm doing it because no one else will. Bradford stood, walking slowly toward him. I'm giving you one chance. Shut down your shelter. Leave this town. Quietly. I'll even give you money to disappear. And if I don't? Bradford leaned in. Then you won't like what happens next. He turned and walked out, his shoes clicking on the old church floor. Elijah stood alone, silent, shaken, until he looked at the pew where Bradford had sat. There, left behind, was a folder. Inside were photos of Elijah's old army base, of Nia, of children who had received his help, their names, faces, addresses. A list, a target list. Then Elijah heard it. The church window cracked. A flash. Glass shattered, and Elijah dropped to the floor as something slammed into the back wall. A brick with a message tied to it. He picked it up, hands trembling. The message read, You've been warned. Next time we won't miss. He looked toward the broken window. Somewhere in the dark, someone was watching. The wind howled through the broken window, scattering shards of glass across the floor like icy confetti. Elijah's hands shook as he clutched the brick and the note. His eyes scanned the darkness outside, heart pounding in his ears. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for them. The children, the mothers, the elders who walked miles for a bowl of soup, the boy who got a birthday cake, the girl who'd just lost her school bag in a fire. Now they were on a list. Targeted. He tucked the note into his coat and backed away from the window, slowly, carefully. Every creak of the wooden floor felt like a thunderclap in the silence. Nia burst through the door moments later, gun drawn and eyes fierce. I saw someone running, she said. I tried to follow, but he disappeared behind the old sawmill. They left this. Elijah handed her the brick and the note. Nia read it, face growing hard. This isn't just about scaring you now. This is a warning to everyone. She spotted the open folder on the pew and flipped through the photos. When she saw the list of names, some with red XS, some circled, her jaw clenched. They're planning something, she whispered. And it's big. Elijah nodded. We need to move fast. By morning, word had already spread. People talked in hushed voices, glancing over their shoulders. Parents kept their children indoors. Even the usually noisy market felt quiet and tense. Bradford, on the other hand, seemed calm. Too calm. He stood on the steps of City Hall later that day, smiling for reporters. There's no threat, he said, waving his hand casually. These so-called attacks are nothing more than street vandalism. It's sad how some people fake danger to stay in the spotlight. But his eyes told another story. Cold, controlling, calculating. Elijah watched the broadcast from the church basement, surrounded by the people he had helped. Nia had turned the church into a temporary safe house. They set up cots, covered the windows, and added extra locks to the doors. We're not running, Elijah said to them. We're standing together. But what if they hurt us? A woman asked, her voice trembling. They won't, Nia promised. Not on my watch. Still, the fear was real. That night, Elijah couldn't sleep. He sat on the church roof, watching the town below, trying to see where the next strike would come from. And that's when he saw it. A group of 3 men, wearing black coats, slipping into the side alley near the soup kitchen's pantry. They moved like shadows, quick and quiet. One of them held a crowbar. Elijah raced down the stairs and into the alley. He didn't shout. He didn't wait. He ran. Hey, he barked. Get away from there. The men spun around. One of them had already broken the lock. Another held a can of gasoline. They weren't just stealing. They were about to burn it all. Get him, one of them yelled. 2 of them charged. Elijah ducked the first swing, slammed his shoulder into the man's gut, and rolled away from a second punch. He had trained for years in the army. He hadn't forgotten. But there were too many of them. One grabbed him from behind. Another punched him in the ribs. He staggered, gasping for breath. Should have stayed quiet, the leader hissed. Then suddenly, crack. A broomstick slammed across the man's back. It was Mrs. Jola, the old bread lady. Behind her, a dozen others appeared, holding sticks, mops, frying pans, anything they could find. You picked the wrong church, she spat. The attackers ran, but not fast enough. The townspeople chased them down, shouting, throwing stones. The youngest, a teenage boy named Malachi, tackled one of them to the ground and held him there until Nia arrived with the police. Elijah lay on the ground, panting, bruised, but smiling weakly. They had fought back. The people had fought for him. At the police station, one of the attackers, a scrawny man with a busted lip, finally talked. Bradford paid us, he mumbled, said to make it look like street crime. Told us to scare the church, break the pantry, burn it if we had to. He said no evidence, no mercy. The officer turned to Nia. We'll need more than his word to arrest Bradford. Then we get more, she said. Back at the church, Elijah stood in front of the broken pantry. The door was split. The shelves were half empty. But people had already started bringing what they could. Loaves of bread, bags of rice, bottled water. One woman gave a box of candles. Another handed over her last tin of powdered milk. Elijah's voice cracked as he thanked them. Even when we are afraid, he said, we can still choose to love. We can still choose to give. The crowd clapped, but the air still felt heavy, because they all knew. Bradford wasn't done. That night, as Elijah washed his face in the small church sink, Nia came in, her face pale. I found something in the mail, she said, holding out a small envelope. Inside was a single photograph of Elijah, standing beside a grave, a fresh one, with no name, just one word carved into the stone. Next, and underneath it, scribbled in red ink. Time's up. The church bell rang suddenly, even though no one had touched it. They both rushed outside, and there, hanging from the bell rope, was a noose. The noose swayed gently in the moonlight, creaking as it turned in the wind like a twisted lullaby. Elijah stared at it, rooted to the ground. The bell rope had been cut halfway, and the noose was tied carefully, professionally, like a message from someone who knew exactly how to make people afraid. Nia stepped in front of him, eyes blazing. "They've crossed the line. This is no longer just about me," Elijah whispered. "This is about silencing everything we've built." He reached up slowly and untied the rope, letting the noose fall to the ground like a snake losing its bite. He turned to the growing group of townspeople gathering around the church, many still in pajamas and wrappers, worry carved deep into their faces. "We don't bow to fear," Elijah said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not now. Not ever." But inside he was shaking, not from the rope, but from the grave. That grave had been real. He remembered it. A small plot just outside the town's edge, one he had visited months ago. It was the resting place of a homeless man named Uncle Amo, someone who used to sit under the church steps every night, singing songs and smiling even when he had nothing. Elijah had buried him when no one else would. The grave was marked with nothing but a wooden cross back then. Now it had a carved stone. A threat. They had been watching him for that long. The next morning, Elijah and Nia stormed into the mayor's office again, this time with the attacker's confession, the threatening notes, the photographs, and pictures of the noose. Mayor Turner listened quietly, her face unreadable. "We need to move on Bradford now," Nia demanded. "He's a danger to Elijah, to this entire community." Mayor Turner looked up slowly. "I believe you. But Bradford isn't just some crooked businessman. He's tied to council members, police donors, and media sponsors. If we go after him too early without a solid case, he'll spin it, turn himself into the victim, and he'll come at you harder." Elijah slammed a fist on the table. "So we wait for what? Someone to actually die?" "No," Turner said, sliding open a drawer. "We trap him, just like he tried to trap you." That night, Elijah called an emergency town meeting at the church. Despite their fear, the room was packed. Candles lit every corner. Even children sat quietly, eyes wide. He stood at the front, voice firm. "We're not backing down. But we will be smart. This isn't just about food or school bags anymore. This is about whether truth and kindness can win against corruption and hate." He took a breath. "I need your help. All of you." He explained the plan. The trap. How they would make Bradford believe Elijah was giving up, leaving town for good. A retirement letter would be leaked. The shelter would close for a day. Cameras would be hidden. The church would be empty, except for Elijah and the people watching from the basement. If Bradford or his men came to celebrate, or destroy what was left, they would be caught. On camera. In the act. It was risky. Dangerous. But the people agreed. Because they were done being afraid. The next day, news broke across town. Elijah Obasai closing shelter, leaving town. The newspaper headline read, "The fraud fades quietly." It was all fake. But Bradford believed it. That night, as planned, the church lights were off. The doors unlocked. No guards. No food. Just darkness and silence. But inside the basement, Nia sat with officers, reporters, and townspeople watching screens connected to tiny hidden cameras. Elijah sat alone upstairs, in the dark, waiting. Hours passed. Then the door creaked. Footsteps. 3 men entered. One of them laughed. "Told you he'd run. Coward." Another pulled a can of gasoline from his coat. "Let's finish the job." That's when Bradford stepped inside, smiling. He walked up to the altar and dropped a match on the floor. "Goodbye, church." Click. The lights blazed on. The basement door burst open. Cameras flashed. Police poured in. "Hands where we can see them." The men froze. Bradford blinked, caught in the center of the stage, holding the match, surrounded. Nia stepped forward. "We got you." The arrest was fast. The confession. Faster. One of the arsonists flipped immediately, spilling everything. Payments. Threats. The grave warning. The van fire. Bradford was exposed on live TV. His plan to silence Elijah turned into the rope he hung himself with. When the trial began, townspeople packed the courtroom. Nia testified. The children testified. Even the reporter who first doubted Elijah spoke in his defense. The judge's final words echoed like thunder. For your actions against this man and this community, you are sentenced to 15 years in prison. Applause broke out in the courtroom. Tears filled Elijah's eyes. He didn't cry for victory. He cried because he had survived. Weeks later, the church was filled again, not with fear, but with music, laughter, celebration. The mayor cut a ribbon outside the church gates, unveiling a new name on the shelter sign, the Elijah Center for Peace and Provision. Volunteers came from across the state. Donors sent supplies. The van was replaced, brighter, bigger, and filled with gifts. And Elijah, he stood quietly at the back, a little girl holding his hand. "You didn't leave," she said. He smiled. "No, and I never will." Because they had set a trap for a fraud, but found unimaginable generosity. And the town, once silent, once scared, had found its voice again. Together,